Hello, friends. I'm Rodney,
And I'm Ga.
and I'd like to officially welcome you to the first episode of Back to the Basics series, where we give you all those answers to those questions that you usually don't get answers to. And we give these answers straight from the Bible. Well, today we have a true blessing. Nga is actually going to be answering some questions, and this question is focusing on the Bible, and that question is the Bible relevant today? Especially to us as youth. I think that's a big question that we all have. Is it relevant to us, Nga? Are you ready?
I'm ready to take this one on. All right, so let's answer this question, the Bible and its relevance to my life as a youth. I feel like when we speak about relevance regarding the Bible, there are many ways to answer this question. We could try to imagine, Rodney, every single scenario that could apply to every single youth and try to find a verse for that scenario. But I would like to take a broader perspective in answering this question. Mainly two perspectives, right? Relevance, firstly, in the sense of its credibility, so the credibility of the Bible, the credibility of the source. And then relevance in terms of its applicability. Let's start with relevance in terms of credibility. We need to look no further when we speak of the Bible, particularly with regards to credibility, to he who inspired it, or rather who inspired the authors. An important verse here is 2 Timothy 3 verses 16. All scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, correction, for training in righteousness. Now what about whom is the Bible based on? Or what do we mean when we say what is the word? Here the answer comes from John 1 verses 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 14 also. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So just as with any book, we look at the credibility. We found out who's inspired its writing, who's it based on, who is the Word, right? Now we know of God the Father and God the Son. What do we know about God the Father, Rodney? Well, we know God the Father to be omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscience, all-powerful, all-present, all-knowing. Now, we can also think of Psalms chapter 139, verses 7 to 10, right, that emphasizes this even more. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. So when we speak is the word relevant, and we know of God the Father, God the Son, we're actually asking another kind of question. Is God relevant? Is Jesus relevant? Because we've seen that God the Father and God the Son cannot be separated from the Word. They're inextricably linked, right? And so we have seen, firstly, that the all-knowing God, right, the all-present God has inspired this Word, which means that when he was inspiring the authors to write what they were writing, he was cognizant already of all the possible issues and scenarios that would have to deal with youth. And that is what makes it so relevant. He's ensured that your story and my story is catered for in the Bible. That is what we mean when we say the credibility of the source. He's all-knowing. And, even before our conception, here if we look at Jeremiah 1 verses 5, God already knew. Let's read it. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest out from the womb, I sanctified thee. And I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations.
Bob, Nga, listening to what you've mentioned so far, you seem to have been talking about the relevance of the Bible for the bigger picture. How about for those small things, those small nitty-gritty? They say in life that it's those small things that make a difference. Is the Bible still relevant for those small things in our life?
Before I answer this question, for the comment section, I want to know from the youths, what are some of the small things that you maybe think the Bible is too big for or too big to answer? Because they could be those things that we think are not, there. But in answering this question, let's go back again to who is the Word, right? Remember, it said in John chapter 1, verses 14, The Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. I'd like to bring out a point here that the Word understands. And where am I getting this reasoning from? Let's look at Acts of the Apostles, chapter 45. E.G. White writes, "The Son of God stooped to uplift the fallen. For this he left the sinless world on high, the 99 that loved him, and he came to earth to be wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities." Isaiah chapter 53, verse 5. Listen, he was in all things made like unto us, his brethren. He became flesh even as we are. He knew what it meant to be hungry, thirsty, and weary. He was sustained by food and refreshed by sleep. He was a stranger and a sojourner on the earth, in the world, but not of the world. Just as men and women are tempted, he was tempted too, yet living a life free from sin, right? Tender, compassionate, sympathetic, ever considerate of others. He represented the character of God. The Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us, full of grace and truth. And so what we see from this text is that even in the nitty-gritties, as you've put it, hunger, thirst, Jesus understood. He went through it. And so when we come back to our question of, is the Word relevant? The Word understands your pain because Jesus felt your pain. The Word is relevant with regards to our struggles because Jesus came down, right? Saw our struggles, felt our struggles. And the same applies even for our successes, right? So all in all, the understanding or the Word, right, is understanding, to answer your question, and is thus relevant. And here, to finally sort of close this first part, read 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 24 to 25. "For all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers, and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever." Now, let's come to the second part, relevance in the sense of applicability. There is one final bit I'd like us to remember. Normally as youths, I don't know, when we speak about relevance sometimes, I think we like to think of something as, is it relevant in terms of how it fits in perfectly for me, right? It's automaticity. So is it fast enough to fit in my life? Is it good enough to fit in my life? We take a very individualistic perspective. But when it comes to the Bible, I think a very different view is required. Whatever it is we're referring to, or it is particularly the Bible, we have to look at this differently. The Bible is not just automatically applicable. It's not about us alone. But in that, we have to actually work, right? We have to study. We have to be dedicated. We have to do our part. And I'm excited because in your coming episodes, you're going to deal with what we need to do as well on our part to work through this. So even though, yes, we have been given this gift, it requires work on our part. And I think once we have understood relevance in terms of credibility and relevance in terms of applicability, we can fully see the relevance of the Bible.
Wow. You know, Nga, after listening to you, I feel so refreshed. And I hope you too, as our viewers, have been refreshed by this episode. Please remember to like us, to share, and if you have any questions, to post them on the details shown on your screen. Well, from us, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Please do join us on the next episode. Bye-bye.